Thank you, and apologize for interrupting your presentation. I want to hear it myself, but thank you very much for the invitation, and good to be with the Washington Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. Welcome to Washington. I'm so appreciative of the leadership of Robert Pittenger on issues related to cross-border capital flows, making sure that we focus on both the economic and security concerns on these issues. And for those of you who don't know, Robert, the chairman, was instrumental in the Congress, in the House Financial Services Committee several years back in drafting and authoring the FIRMA legislation, which updated our CFIUS process. And as Mr. Dasgupta was just describing, in the United States, we have a multi-agency review process to screen inbound investment, malign investment, designed not to benefit necessarily our economy, which most foreign direct investment does, by the way, but instead to exploit our system to force the transfer of technology, steal intellectual property, and facilitate tech transfers in ways that could threaten our collective security. And so updating that process several years back by the Congress, we accomplished three main objectives, which were gaps or holes in the inbound investment screening regime. One was joint ventures. Joint ventures were not previously screened. Congressman Pittenger's bill did trigger a process whereby joint ventures would be screened. Also, minority investments. Previously, CFIUS was only looking at majority investments into U.S. firms. We were now able, we gave CFIUS, the multi-agency reviewers, the ability to look at minority investments where the foreign entity may not have a majority stake or shareholder position, but nevertheless would gain great visibility into the intellectual property or have some controlling features of that entity. And finally, real estate. And we still have gaps in that, but we saw cases of malign investment of real estate in parts of the country that had national security implications. Farmland is getting a lot of attention right now, not just for food security and the food supply chain, but also farmland adjacent to national security sensitive sites. And so CFIUS now reviews for those as well. What I think I've been asked to talk about here today is proposals that would create a reverse CFIUS or an outbound investment screening regime. This has gained a lot of attention in the Congress. My jurisdiction, my assignments in the Congress converge on this topic because I serve not only as a senior member of the Financial Services Committee, with jurisdiction over the Department of Treasury and OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is the agency within Treasury that implements and enforces our sanctions policy, but also the Indo-Pacific Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which is very focused on competition with China and the Indo-Pacific region. And then also, finally, the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. And so we're looking at this issue in, I think, a thoughtful way, in a bipartisan way, in a bicameral way, both the House and the Senate. And let me just describe three different approaches that we're looking at. One is from the White House. The White House has identified three critical sectors that, and through an executive order, they've directed a rulemaking to scrutinize outbound investments in artificial intelligence, microelectronics, and quantum computing. It is both a disclosure regime and, in some narrow cases, a prohibition on restricting U.S. investment in certain Chinese entities that are within those three critical national security sectors. Then there's the Casey Cornyn approach, and Casey Cornyn, Senators Casey and Cornyn, have modified an earlier version of their effort, which was called the National Critical Capabilities Defense Act, Their legislation, which was an amendment to the NDAA, and which we understand now has fallen out of the final NDAA, would establish an outbound investment notification regime. It would require notification of investments in covered entities, but does not establish any outbound restrictions, which is, again, a modification from the earlier version. It would require any U.S. person that engages in a covered transaction to notify the Department of Treasury, and those covered transactions would include a broader range of sectors. It would include acquisitions, debt investments, or JVs, and similar activity taken by U.S. persons operating in critical sectors or investing in them. And the critical sectors are defined as semiconductors, AI, quantum information, hypersonics, satellite-based communications, and networked laser scanning systems. Finally, the third approach is the approach of the House Financial Services Committee. This is my legislation, the Chinese Military and Surveillance Companies Sanctions Act. This is different than a sector-based approach. It is an entity-based approach, and it is a sanctions-based approach. It's not like CFIUS, and it's not a reverse CFIUS. It is a targeted approach that would have, unlike these other regimes, not focused exclusively on the United States, but it would have a multilateral effect. And so because we have an international audience, this may be of interest to a lot of you here. The idea would be that Treasury would apply full blocking sanctions on certain entities that are already listed under certain U.S. government lists. We have 4 in particular. The entity list at the Department of Commerce, which is an export control list, a military end user list, which is a subset of that. This is administered by the Bureau BIS, what is it? Industry and Security, the Bureau of Industry Security at the Department of Commerce. Primarily an export control list designed to stop the transfer of sensitive technologies to malign actors or adversaries or competitors. And then there is the 1260H list that is maintained by the Department of Defense. This is a list of Chinese military companies. And then there is a list that's maintained by the Department of Treasury as a byproduct of 2 executive orders, one from President Trump and one follow-on executive order from President Biden. And this is the list of Chinese military industrial complex companies that facilitate the military-civil fusion in China. These are companies of national security concern. And the idea behind the legislation out of the Financial Services Committee is it would require the Department of Treasury to do an annual review of all of these lists and impose full blocking sanctions, SDN, what we call SDN, specially designated nationals, full blocking sanctions on those entities that they deem to be a threat to national security. Why does that matter? Because it is an entity-focused list. It's a red light, green light system. It's not reverse CFIUS. It's not multi-agency in the implementation phase of it. It's Treasury. And sanctions apply to every kind of investment, equity investment, debt investments, JVs, contracts, exports. Basically, if you are subject to full blocking sanctions from OFAC, it is a nuclear option. Do not touch that. And for our foreign partners, it basically says not only to U.S. investors, but to our friends and our partners and our allies that you have a choice. You can do business with the United States. You can have access to the U.S. financial system, or you can do business with this Chinese entity, but you can't do both. And so it does have that multilateral effect. It is very powerful. It is very strong, but it's targeted and it's surgical and it's entity-focused, not ensnaring benign outbound investment that is in some of these just sector-based designations. Now, why do I think that the Financial Services Committee, the targeted approach, is the preferable approach? I will say I think CFIUS is a great tool. It's very important. And Chairman Pittenger has done a great job with that. And the Speaker, by the way, has convened a working group. Chairman McHenry, the Financial Services Committee, Chairman McCall of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Gallagher of the Select Committee, myself, to come to a consensus. And we want a bipartisan, bicameral consensus on this issue. What is the right approach to restricting investments into China. Why is this important? Well, because as of January 9th, 2023, there were 252 Chinese companies listed on U.S. exchanges with a total market cap of $1.3 trillion. That's up from 2022 significantly. U.S. Also, according to a tracking by the Rhodium Group, U.S. investors have been carrying about 3,000 transactions per year in China. And so there is this concern that U.S. and non-U.S. investors are unwittingly financing Chinese military industrial complex companies that actually threaten our national security, surveillance companies, technology companies, military companies. So the idea of a red light, green light system, I think, is the preferable one. Why? Because not all investments in China are bad. Not all cross-border investments are bad. In fact, our default should be that cross-border capital flows are good. This is an international group. We trade with one another. We invest in each other's companies. Foreign direct investment, generally speaking, benefits the United States, and it benefits countries that you represent. So cross-border capital flows are good. We should never do things that signal to the world that we are no longer committed to free market capitalism. In the strategic competition between the West and the Chinese Communist Party, I submit that the strategic advantage, the inherent advantage that Western economies have in that competition with the CCP is that we are committed to free market capitalism. This is why we have the deepest, most liquid capital markets in the world. Whereas the greatest Achilles heel of authoritarian closed systems, like the system in Beijing, is that the industrial policy, the mercantilist policy, the central planning policies, the communist system is the disadvantage that they have. So we in the West should not try to compete with China by emulating China or imitating China or becoming more like China. We should be the best version of ourselves. And that's why I think a targeted strategic approach is the best approach, focusing on entities of national security concern, blocking outbound capital flows in ways that actually truly do undermine our national security, but not ensnaring those benign cross-border capital flows that actually enrich Western companies. So with that, I will stop. I don't know if we have time for questions, or Robert, if you want questions. But that's kind of an update on where we are in the process. The Speaker of the House has asked the various members with jurisdiction to try to come to some kind of a consensus position by the first quarter of next year. We weren't able to get it done for this year's National Defense Authorization Act. But I think there is opportunity for compromise. I think Chairman Gallagher and Chairman McCall are right to be concerned about particular sectors, emerging sectors of national security concern, no doubt. Hypersonics, AI, quantum computing, microelectronics, these are sensitive sectors that do risk national security compromises. So we do need to focus on that, but not to have a too broad sweeping approach where, let's face it, every company has some kind of AI focus now. And if we just block beneficial investment or trade with China or other Asian countries or other countries in general that just doesn't implicate national security, even though there's some kind of ancillary AI component to maybe a salad making company or an ag company, that is probably an overbroad approach. Thank you.